Hey guys, good morning. Welcome to Mr. Smith's Kitchen. I'm Brian. You could say host, director, producer, editor, camera guy. Pretty much it's just me. But anyhow, uh, welcome. If you're new, really welcome. If you're returning for more fun and adventures or knowledge, um, I'm glad to have you back. Either way, welcome. Today, as promised or mentioned yesterday, I promised nothing. Let's just get that straight now. Life happens. There's always a plan B. Things change. But as I've talked about the last couple of days, today instead of baking something, I thought we would look at spices. You know, as far as like combined seasonings, Italian seasoning, taco mix. I guess you could say seasoning mixes. Um, and the benefits of them versus buying them prepackaged. Not that there's anything wrong with that, um, but I think it would be it's a lot of fun. I mean, it really is. I putting it together. So oh, excuse me. Before I forget, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Hit like if you want to. As I don't monetize and I don't do this for money. I do this for to give my great grandkids the idea of what their great grandfather was like in case we never get to meet, or my great great grandkids. I want to be around as long as possible, and film is the only way to do it. So anyhow, spice mixes. We do make a few of our spice mixes ourselves. Some things we buy. I mean, obviously, but a few of them we like to try on our own. So the things we do make on our own, we make our own taco seasoning. We make our own fajita seasoning. We make pumpkin spice. We make. I have a recipe for Italian seasoning, and we make our own powdered ranch mix. Like you'd buy the Hidden Valley packs. We find it, I guess, more convenient because we already have all the stuff here to make them. Plus, one of the advantages to making your own, and this is probably the biggest advantage, because I mean, cost could come into play to some extent, but I mean, at the same time, it's probably about the same price to make them versus buy them. And the reason why I say that, I mean, okay, so if you take, well, we'll take this Italian seasoning I have right here. Italian seasoning. Says so right on the label. Mr. Smith's Kitchen. Love these labels. To buy this in the store, it might cost you a couple bucks. $2, $3. Now, the thought behind that is, I've got it, it's done. If you make your own, you're going to have to buy, I mean, I've got, we'll look at the list of what it all is in Italian seasoning. There's, basil, oregano, rosemary, marjoram, cilantro, dried thyme, and all these are dried, by the way, nothing fresh. A spice called savory, and red pepper flakes. That is what's in Italian seasoning. And if you want to make that on your own, it's 2 tablespoons of each. So you're saying to yourself, wow, Brian, well, if each of those spices cost $2 each, you'd be looking at $16. Well, that doesn't sound very good. $16 to make it yourself, or $2 to buy it in a kit. But here's the cool thing about it. You're not going to use the entire jar of each of these spices. You're going to use, in this case, it's 2 tablespoons of each. So that leaves you spices left over, and I don't know about in your household, but I know in my household and every household I've ever been in, everybody has basil, oregano, rosemary, cilantro, dyed thyme, and pepper flakes. Samantha, thank you. So the only thing that would be a little iffy, would it be worth buying, is the marjoram and the savory. I personally don't use a lot of those, but I do use a lot of Italian seasoning. So would it be worth it to buy these? I think so, because a majority of the ingredients you use on a regular basis. And that's what I think is the best thing about it. So in a way, it does save you money, in the long run. The other cool thing about it is you get to choose the amounts of what you put in it. So like the Italian seasoning I just mentioned, it was all 2 tablespoons of each. It was equal parts. Well, let's say you like it to be a little basil heavy, or a little cilantro heavy, or a little thyme light, or rosemary light, or whatever. You can adjust those to you and your family. Make it your own. And then that way, someday when you're older and you've got great grandkids, and they can go, well, this was my great grandparents' Italian seasoning recipe for their spaghetti sauce. And there won't be another one like it. If that recipe doesn't get passed down, nobody else will know how to make it. There's a date nut log, not to get too far off topic, that my great aunt had that was passed down, and she would never give it to me. Never. She did end up giving it to my brother, though. But it's sworn to secrecy. They are the holder of the date nut log. So the only time we get it is when they make it, and that's usually at Christmas time because it's a holiday gig. All right, so another thing to think about when buying spices, making your own mixes, whatever, just spices in general, is when you go to purchase your spices, if it comes in seed form, or a whole, should you buy it in ground or whole, or ground or dried? There are a couple advantages to that. I feel, in my opinion, I think you get a better flavor if you can buy it whole, or just buy it dried. Now, what I mean by dried is, let me see if I can find some. Okay, so thyme, the plant thyme. If you buy it whole, if you can buy it fresh or dried, it still has all its flavors and preservatives in it. If you buy it powder form, it loses something. Now, something's called for. This is thyme right here, and I've got fresh thyme growing out in the herbs, that I will dry in the fall. Most of my herbs I grow to either use fresh if the recipe calls for it, or I will hang them and let them dry naturally. And that works well, hanging them and drying them naturally, if you have a fairly climate-controlled area, or you live in some places dry. Humidity, unfortunately, can beget mold, which gives you bacteria growth, which can ruin the drying process. If not, you can use a dehydrator or your oven, set it at the lowest setting, and let it go for a couple hours, and that will also dry your things. But ground, it doesn't last as long. Now, by last as long, spices don't, they're kind of like a use by, best if used by date. They'll tell you 6 to 8 months on spices. And for the most part, for best flavor, that's true. You want to go about 6 to 8 months. But the reality of that is, if it's maintained, in a good environment, like this is a tightly sealed container, doesn't let a lot of air in or out, it can be good for a year, maybe even dare say 2. Now, with a whole spice, and by a whole spice, I will show you, is like these coriander seeds right here. These are good forever. Well, I mean, at least, a year or so, year, 18 months. And the reason they maintain their flavor, because it's the whole seed still in its shell, so all the goodies are inside the shell. And then all you have to do is crush it up. I buy my allspice that way also, because allspice, which is primarily used for baking, it really only gets used holiday season. Cloves are the same way if you can buy them whole. you can grind them up. That being said, and I'm trying to move quickly because I know this video is probably going to run a little long anyhow. How do you grind them up? You know, I mean, because that's a seed, you know, so it's not like you could probably use the back of a spoon and just smash them. That would take a minute and a lot of work. But I have 3 other options for you. What are they, you ask? Let me tell you. The first one is really kind of cool, and it can serve dual purpose. Is nothing more than a coffee bean grinder. You already have one in your house, more than likely. I mean, if you do fresh coffee, you've got one in your house. Just make sure it's cleaned out really good before you go grinding spices and after you grind spices. Or either your spices are going to taste like coffee or your coffee is going to taste like spices. You know, and I think coriander flavored coffee would be rather interesting. Or a clove coffee would be interesting. Another option you could have is the Magic Bullet, which is right here. Quit giggling. I know. I was thinking the same thing. But, and it's essentially just like the coffee grinder. You would put your grounds in here, or your whole seeds in here, and see it turns upside down. This is actually used to make smoothies or health drinks, which I don't drink either. Not a fan. I think most of them taste bland. Or your third option, which is my preferred option, just because most of the time I'm not grinding up more than a teaspoon or a tablespoon, although the coffee grinder would work nicely, is just a simple mortar and pestle. They can get horribly expensive to purchase, but for the most part they're not. And you just simply stick your seeds in there. As a matter of fact, I've got some coriander seeds in there. And all you have to do, literally, is just sit here and grind it up. And I honestly find that therapeutic, you know, to just sit here and grind. You know, the sound is kind of cool. It's very crunchy. You know, you get to hear all that good stuff. But that's it. Just those are 3 options you have to make this happen. All right, so we've talked about different types of spices, whole spices, you know, seeds versus buying them pre-done, longevity in buying the whole ones, as long as you can store them in a dry, you know, comfortable place. Making mixes versus buying mixes and being able to control things. So let's get into making some mixes. The first one we're going to talk about more than, and I'll show you some, actually make it only because I already have some, is powdered ranch dressing mix. Now, you could say powdered ranch dressing mix, that's crazy. You can just buy ranch dressing mix at the store, and you're right, you can. But here's the cool thing about making it. Once again, you know what's in it. Right here's mine. And the stuff you put in it, you should already have anyhow. So one of the main ingredients in it, right here is the handy dandy list. Very first ingredient is a half a cup of dehydrated or dry buttermilk. Let me tell you about the beauty of dry buttermilk, especially if you bake or you make biscuits or anything involving buttermilk. I don't know about you, but here we would buy one of the little containers of buttermilk, you know, full-fledged buttermilk, use a cup or 2 out of it, and the rest of it would sit in the fridge and go bad, or sit in the freezer and get in the way. So, dried buttermilk, dehydrated buttermilk, it comes in a container, you know, half the size of a gallon jug, and you store it in your cabinet till you open it. Then it goes in the refrigerator, but it allows you to control the amount, and it doesn't go bad. You know, it lasts so much longer, doesn't take up nearly the space, and it's more cost effective. You know, you don't have to worry about, oh, I want to cook this, I need to get buttermilk. A container of buttermilk powder, dehydrated powder, will make more than you'll need, more than likely, in a year, unless you're using it on an industrial level. The second thing you're going to need is dried parsley. Dried, not shredded, not ground, just dried. You know, it's chopped up, but it's dried. It's not ground up. You're gonna need dried dill. Now, I have fresh dried dill, but then I also have dried dill from our local Mennonite store. Well, Ashby Farms is the name of the company, or the store, and they sell a ridiculous amount of spices in whole, dried, and ground forms. Dried chives, which I had out, but I don't see them now. Anyhow, dried chives. Garlic powder, onion powder, salt, and ground pepper. The amounts to those are, and this is for the ranch mix, this will get you this right here, which is great for chicken tater tot casserole, which we're going to make next week. Great stuff. So you've got your half cup of butter, dried buttermilk powder, 1 tablespoon of dried parsley, 2 teaspoons of dill, dried, 1 teaspoon of chives, and like I said, all this stuff is dried, with the exception of the garlic powder and the onion powder, and that's because it's in the name, it's powder. 1 tablespoon of each of those, a teaspoon of salt, and a half a teaspoon of pepper. Boom, ranch dressing. Right here. Now, as far as making actual ranch dressing with this, I don't know what the liquid amount is for it because we don't make ranch dressing. Only because we just don't eat ranch dressing, but I use it to cook with an awful lot, at least the mix. So, and then once you make it, stick it in your fridge, all right, because the buttermilk the powder, once you open it, has to be refrigerated, and it's good for about 2-3 months, minimum 2-3 months. If your refrigerator stays good and it doesn't get a lot of humidity in it, it could be good a lot longer. Smell it, put a little bit on your finger and taste it, and if it still tastes like ranch dressing, chances are pretty good it's good. Now, don't quote me on that. I don't want somebody coming back and saying, dude, I got sick because I ate this 3 years down the road and, it was horrible. Remember, most spices combined, 6 months, 12 months before they start losing their flavor. Buttermilk, 2 to 3 months in your fridge. Which that's I don't know, about half a batch left. If even that. There's a handful of dishes I make that have that in it. All right, so that would be our dry ranch mix. The next one, I'll tilt the camera down a little bit, and you'll be able to see how we make it. Let me get some of this cleared up here. And we're going to make taco seasoning, because I'm actually low on taco seasoning, fajita seasoning, and pumpkin spice. So they're really easy. Let's go over the list real quick on how to make the taco seasoning. So you're going to need, we'll grab a bowl real quick to mix this in. You're going to need 1 tablespoon of chili powder, 1 teaspoon of cumin, 1 teaspoon of garlic, 1 teaspoon of smoked paprika, half a teaspoon of oregano, half teaspoon of onion powder, 1/4 teaspoon of salt, 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper, 1/4 teaspoon of red pepper flakes, and 1/8 of a teaspoon of cayenne. You're like, holy crap, Brian, that is a lot of spices. And you're right. So, it is a lot of spices. I'm not going to deny that, not one inkling of a bit. It is an amazing amount of spices. Let me grab my little measuring cups here right quick. Now, I have a new set of measuring cups, and they're absolutely wonderful, and they measure accurately right here. But they don't fit into, the tablespoon doesn't fit in. So I've got my old set up, because I know they fit in there. So all you're literally going to do, let me turn you down so you can see what I'm doing. Wow. You know what, instead of using this bowl, give me 1 second and I'll be right back. Okay, sorry about that. I have never claimed to be professional, never will, but I just keep it as real as possible. Decided instead of mixing it in bowls, we're just going to go ahead and put them straight into the jars. So, to make seasonings mixes is really easy. I'm literally just going to follow the list there. And like I said, unlike with baking, this doesn't have to be exact. So we're going to do 1 tablespoon of chili powder, 1 teaspoon of cumin, 1 teaspoon of garlic powder, or you can use granulated garlic. And like I said, you can adjust these to suit your needs. 1 teaspoon of smoked paprika, half a teaspoon of oregano. And you can not only make single batches, like this is a single batch. You could make double batches, triple batches, depending on how much you use. Half teaspoon of onion powder, half a teaspoon of it's a fine salt, and I say fine like a table salt. Or you can use kosher salt, just grind it up real fine, or leave it whole, however you like it. Will be the way. In this case, I don't use kosher salt, I use table salt. And then you're going to need a 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper, and a 1/4 teaspoon of crushed red peppers, or birdseed, or whatever you like to call it, but it's just dried peppers. And then 1/8 of a teaspoon of cayenne. Now, I don't have 1/8 of a teaspoon measuring cup, so all I do is take my 1/4 teaspoon, fill it up, so it's about halfway, or a little more, a little less. After you get that in there, all you have to do, honest to God, we've got all our ingredients in there, looking good, put the lid on it, shake it up, just like the song says, shake it up, and boom, instant taco seasoning. You can see that, there you are, made from scratch. Put in what you want to put into it. Now, after you make them, depending on how often you use them, I don't write the dates on these because we actually use them quicker than 6 months. We cook with so much of the seasoning mixes I make that I don't date them, but I do label it. So it's taco right on there. And this is good for beef or chicken. I have found that there's not a whole lot of difference between chicken taco seasoning and beef taco seasoning. I haven't found any difference in them that I'm aware of. I could be wrong. If there is a difference, let me know. Just leave me a comment down below. I'd be happy to see. All right, so we got taco seasoning made. We've got our ranch dressing ingredients taken care of, and I already got it made. So the next thing we're going to make is fajita seasoning, which I need to get. You guys are about to see my cupboard for a second. Wrong side. There it is. Let me scoot you out. So this is what not being prepared is. But if you were just sitting here at the kitchen table talking to me, I'd have to get things out of the cupboard. So the ingredients list for our fajita seasoning, which is really easy, is 1 tablespoon of cornstarch of your choice. This seems to be the most popular brand. Yes, we're going to put that in there. 1 tablespoon of cornstarch. And then, in this case, you notice on the last one I didn't wash off my spoons in between every single one. It doesn't really stick on there, and it doesn't really mingle with the other spices, so there's no need. But with cornstarch, that powder sticks to everything. So we'll go ahead and wash off the tablespoon real quick. Always have your sink full of fresh water, especially if if you're like me and you spend a lot of time in the kitchen, cooking, baking, just hanging out, eating, then you want to keep that going. All right, so the first thing on the ingredients list for fajita seasoning was that tablespoon of cornstarch. Then we're going to do, once again, 2 teaspoons of chili powder. Chili powder seems to be in everything we make, which is okay with me. I love chili powder. Interesting thing about chili powder is nobody's chili powder is the same, for the most part, company-wise, because it's whatever chili you make it out of. So any pepper that you make it out of. Like, for example, technically, this is chili powder. See how it's bright red and that's not? This is bright red because it's made out of dried jalapenos and ghost peppers. But those are chilies, so hence chili powder. So if you want to make your own, you can just dehydrate out some peppers. You know, I don't have a dehydrator, so I hang all mine to dry. Downside to that is it takes about 6 months for it to completely dry out. But they're good. All right, so 1 tablespoon cornstarch, 2 teaspoons of chili powder, 1 teaspoon of salt. Once again, a fine salt. If you buy kosher, kosher's awesome. Grind it up. Use your bullet mixer, your pestle, to make it a fine one. Unless you don't want to, well, it's up to you. 1 teaspoon of paprika. 1 teaspoon of sugar. Yeah, so let me get the big jar. Yeah. If you can buy in bulk, that is always your best option. I, honest to God, have a 5-gallon jug down in my, or a 5-gallon container bucket down in my basement, filled with sugar, and another one filled with flour. That's how much sugar and flour we go through cooking all the time. But the more you buy, the less it costs overall. All right, so 1 teaspoon of sugar, 1 teaspoon of onion powder. It's almost taco seasoning, just not quite as many ingredients. Half a teaspoon of a teaspoon of garlic powder, half a teaspoon of onion powder, quarter teaspoon of cayenne, a quarter teaspoon of ground cumin right here, and you can stop right there. That's kind of like the American version of a fajita seasoning, to my understanding. But to give it a more authentic taste, and this is based on just when I was reading about how to make a fajita seasoning for one of my dishes that we cook. They said that you could also add, for more authentic flavor, cinnamon and coriander, and both of those are a quarter teaspoon or an eighth a teaspoon, so eighth a teaspoon of cinnamon. And then I'm going to use my ground coriander here that's in the pestle that I ground fresh this morning, so that way I know it'll last me a lifetime. And boom, that is it. So fajita seasoning is, oh, I gotta get the lid for it, so that way we can shake it. If you're wondering why I keep walking over there, I actually have some seasonings left, and what I'm going to do is I'll add these 3 seasonings to my new seasonings. I put them on top. That way they're first in, first out, you know, or FIFO. That way it gets used first. All right, so once again, we're just going to take that and shake it. So the fajita seasoning recipe was 1 tablespoon cornstarch, 2 teaspoons of chili powder, 1 teaspoon of salt, 1 teaspoon paprika, 1 teaspoon sugar, half a teaspoon onion powder, half a teaspoon garlic powder, quarter teaspoon cayenne pepper, half a teaspoon ground cumin, quarter teaspoon cinnamon, and a quarter teaspoon coriander. Just a handful of ingredients, and then we shook it up. All right, and we wrote fajita seasoning at the top. Well, I wrote fajita. Much like the taco seasoning, I just wrote taco because that's, I mean, in my mind's eye, that's kind of obvious. I don't need to write seasoning on it. I made them. I know they're seasoning. All right, so the last one I want to show you for today is, you could say, some people would say, Brian, it's more of a holiday spice. And I kind of agree with that, but I kind of don't because I like pumpkin pie all year long. I like pumpkin spice flavored creamer for coffee occasionally. You know, which we have 12 different recipes for coffee creamer, all kinds of flavors. Pick a flavor that we make on occasion, but not very often. Creamer is delicious in a coffee, but it's also not healthy for you. And that's pumpkin spice. Pumpkin spice is fun. It tastes good. You can use it in an apple pie. You can use it in a pumpkin pie. You can put it in your coffee. Desserts, breads, everything. You can use it all year long. It's not just for the holidays. All right, well, let me get this all cleared up real quick and get reset. And when I come back, we're going to make pumpkin spice. All right? I'll see you here in just a second. Okay, so got everything cleaned up. Got all the spices put away that we were using to make savory spice mixes. Now we're going to make a pumpkin spice mix. More of a dessert, coffee creamer, holiday based. Although, like I said, I would much rather have it around because we like pumpkin stuff all year round. You wake up one morning and go, I want some pumpkin spice coffee creamer in my coffee. You can make it. You have it. It's awesome. And it tastes better because you can control what you put in it versus buying it ready-made, as always. All right, so anyhow, the ingredients list for pumpkin pie spice is really, really easy. So we're going to do cinnamon. I use a Vietnamese style cinnamon. And we want 3 tablespoons of that. And once again, I can't fit my tablespoon into... Here's what we'll do. Where there's a will, there's a way. We will take a different tablespoon. But we need 3 tablespoons of cinnamon. It does get a lot of cinnamon, but it's okay. Cinnamon's good. It's actually good for you. And, a while back there, that cinnamon challenge on social media, and that's just dumb. You cannot eat cinnamon in its raw form. It's great to cook with, adds lots of flavor, and you can eat it when it's mixed with things. But you cannot eat cinnamon, so please don't try that on its own. That's just a ridiculous thing to do. Alright, so we got our 3 tablespoons of cinnamon. I am going to wash these off real quick because cinnamon, much like the cornstarch and baking powder and baking soda, all like to stick to everything. And it doesn't take 2 seconds to just wipe it off. Alright, so we've got our 3 tablespoons of cinnamon in there. The next thing we need is 2 teaspoons of ground ginger, which is, right here, G's a Pete. And you can just use store-bought ground ginger. It won't hurt anything. Now, if you've got the time, like I said, if you own a dehydrator, buying fresh ginger and dehydrating it and then grinding it is way more better. We have fresh ginger. I just don't have a dehydrator. So we got our 2 teaspoons of ground ginger in there. We want 2 teaspoons of nutmeg, which is right here. Nutmeg is essential. And there's only a little bit left in there. Let's throw it all in there. It'll be slightly nutmeg heavy, but not bad. We need 1.5 teaspoons of allspice. So we'll go 1, Get my half teaspoon out. We'll make this proper. I want you guys to see it proper made. Yeah. A lot of times, I will, when it's just me making stuff for myself, like this 1 teaspoon right here, I would just take it and then half that, kind of like I did with the 1/8 teaspoons for the other ones. Only because I don't have finding an 1/8 teaspoon measuring cup is like crazy hard to do. So we got our allspice in there, and then we need 1.5 teaspoons of ground cloves. Now, if you can also, once again, like that was almost a teaspoon. There we go. You can buy cloves whole. Matter of fact, I think I have some downstairs in the downstairs pantry. But we also had some ground cloves already. Get that in there. Which it looks like I'm going to have to grind some anyhow because I am now out in the pre-bought. And the last thing to put in here, which is kind of an option, not everybody likes it to my understanding, although I think it tastes fabulous, is cardamom. And it gets a 1/2 teaspoon. Now, this is probably the one thing you want to be careful when you measure because it can be overpowering. But I think it just sets the pumpkin spice flavor, it just kicks it up a notch. That's my opinion. So once again, we've got, that's it. That's all the ingredients there are to it. And we're going to take these, take the lid off the old one, put it on the new one. And you want to rotate out your jars when you make fresh. You don't want to just keep dumping on top of the old, because what happens then is you never get to use the old. You're just constantly using the fresh. And you don't want that. So we shook it up, and voila, we have pumpkin spice. Right there. Pumpkin spice. Some of the best pumpkin spice I've ever had. Of course, I'm a little biased because I make it. But that being said, that is a quick introduction into how to make spices. Or spice mixes. So now I've given you the recipe to make what I believe are some of the more common spice mixes. You got pumpkin spice, you got taco seasoning, ranch mix, you've got fajita seasoning, and Italian seasoning that you can put into your arsenal. I recommend giving them a shot. When you put them in a container, make sure it's an airtight container. Like these ones here, they're ball jars with ball jar lids. That way they seal a little. It maintains freshness. You don't want to just leave them loose and open. I mean, you can, but they won't last as long. Humidity gets to them, the air gets to them. The air is what causes your spices to go stale and lose their flavor. So if you could put them in a container, and that's like, I could even take this one step further. Excuse me. If I owned one, they make a vacuum seal machine that you put on this, and the vacuum seal part is not expensive. It's the machine that seals it that gets pricey. But that being said, I could do that, and then that way these would be sealed and good for potentially years because there'd be no air in them. But like I said, the spice mixes we make don't last 6 months in our house. So good for 6 months to a year. About 3/4 of the cost of buying it pre-made, and you get all these extra spices to keep in your arsenal. Because when we cook, as you cook with me and we learn and try new recipes, those will be spices that we use. All right, well, I hope you got something out of this. I hope you learned something new, and I hope you try at least these spice mixes. If you do, let me know what you think of them. We think they're really good, but you may have a different opinion. You may make this pumpkin spice and put it in your coffee and go, Brian, that was the most amazing pumpkin spice I have ever had in my life. Or you may say, Brian, that sucked. But we like it. We've made coffee creamer out of it, put it straight. We've made apple pies out of it. We've made pumpkin pies out of it. It's just such a diversified spice blend. Just like Italian seasoning or the ranch mix. You can make ranch dressing out of it. You can put it in a dish that calls for ranch. You know, the possibilities are endless. All right, try them. Let me know. I am going to go start my day now. I hope you have had a wonderful morning or evening or afternoon or whenever it is you watch this video. I love you. Tell somebody else you love them. Let me know what you think, and I will talk to you later. All right? Have a great day. Bye.